Welcome to Biblically Lit, conversations that illuminate Scripture and ignite faith. I'm your host, MindiJoFurby, author and founder of Kingswind Books. Hi friends, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to listen to this conversation. You are really going to enjoy this one. Today I get to chat with two of my favorite guys, my husband Sean, who's been on a couple of times in the past, and his dad Matt. Matt is going to be the one that we're gleaning from today primarily though. I really just wanted Sean here to join in because I do think that he can add a lot to the conversation, especially when we get to some of the harder stuff that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. If you know Matt, you know he is one of the nicest, most thoughtful, considerate, and compassionate people on planet Earth. The first time that I met Matt, he called me dear and gave me a huge hug and a kiss on the cheek. I immediately felt known and loved and have never even for a second felt otherwise from him. Unlike me, Matt is never rushed. He will never end a conversation until the person he's talking to is actually done, and he's fantastic at asking questions and cutting through the noise to get to the pulse of what's really going on in someone's heart. He is also so compassionate. He doesn't just hear about people hurting, he feels it, and will do anything and everything he can to alleviate their suffering. Along those lines, he is the epitome of a helper. He is a super talented handyman and will be over in 2 seconds flat when needed. He can fix pretty much anything, and he can build quite a few things too. He has helped Sean and I so many times when it started really in North Carolina when we renovated our first gut job of a house, and has helped us with countless other projects over the years as well. He and Belinda, his wife, who has also been a guest on this podcast, they have been married for 38 years and have raised 3 kids. Sean, my husband, and he is the oldest as well, and then 2 little sisters, Ellen and Mary. Matt grew up in Louisiana and has worked around chemicals his whole life, which is way outside of my realm of expertise and knowledge, and he is currently a project manager at Trinity Manufacturing in North Carolina. Matt will always bring a smile to your face and occasionally a roll to your eyes. But our daughters call him Burpy or Silly Burpy. And because for some reason Leland couldn't say Grampy when she was tiny. So Burpy he is and Burpy he will forever be. But they enjoy, and we all enjoy every second that we get to spend with him during his frequent visits. He brings joy to every room, and I know that he will bring joy to your life with this conversation. So without further ado, welcome Matt or Burpy.
Wow, thanks for that. Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're here and that we get to chat. So to start us out, tell us a bit about yourself and specifically your background and then your story of faith.
Sure. First, I don't have something written about you as much as you've written about me, but okay. I have thought about it and what you've meant to our family and what you've meant to me. And thank you. Thank you. You've seasoned us. You've filled in, I know, some spots that I needed filling in and that our family did. And it's certainly no accident that God brought you into our family. And we're so thankful for you and the wonderful mother you are and the great daughter-in-law and the helpmate to our son. So thank you.
Well, it's reciprocated.
And until this moment, you were one of the smarter people I know, but you have...
Oh, snap. The eye roll is already beginning.
You have broken a big rule, and it's never put a microphone in front of me, especially a big fancy microphone like this.
It's either breaking a rule or a grand experiment. We will
it's a grand
figure it out.
Of course, there is fancy editing software. So
that's fair, and Sean is here. So.
No, seriously, thank you. About a bit about myself. Like you said, I grew up in Louisiana. I was the baby of the first 5, and so there is a birth order thing going on. We had the oldest was 10, and so my parents had 5 kids in 10 years, and I was the youngest of that first crew. And kind of, I don't think my feet hit the ground. I had an older sister that carried me for a while, and so there is that. a little bit about my faith background. I've obviously thought about it a bit. Is I remember when I was extremely young, we would take my aunt to the synagogue. So my middle name is Littman. I do have there's some Jewish blood in me. I never was practicing, but it was kind of in the background of conversations. And so that's kind of there floating around. But you didn't know my father well, and when you did, he was just a kind of a grumpy old dude. But before he was that, he when he was 16 or so, he got a girlfriend of his to make a fake ID so he could join the Marines. I think maybe 16 or 17. He might have made it 17 because the first one didn't work and they sent him back. Oh, no. That gave him a chance to get kicked out of a couple more high schools in town until he could go into Marines. So he went to the Marines and went out to 29 Palms or whatever. He went out to California for basic training or boot camp, and he met my mom there. Their first assignment together was in Hawaii. So he had my older two sisters in Hawaii, and I have a picture that I hope my brother has that I can find, but it's my dad. You know, he would occasionally drink a beer or 10, and he was out by the beach, you know, without a shirt, drinking a beer with another guy. Well, come to find out, that was a priest that he had befriended, and during that time, they joined the Catholic Church, and so. That continued through the birth of the other three old kids. So our family grew up, you know, I grew up Catholic. And in Louisiana, it can become more of just a social, and it's just kind of what you are. There's a lot of those. But I do recall, even small, that I was really struck by the majesty that was there, the holiness, the reverence, that did strike me, and I think stayed with me and helped form me. So I went through, First Communion and confession and confirmation, and became an altar boy and took it a bit further, I think, than any of my siblings. In fact, I know I did. So it was personal for me. I had choices. I remember the cathedral, the bigger church in town, needed someone to be an altar boy, and I was driving then. So in Louisiana, it had to be over 14 or so, but I don't remember how.
Well, that's good. I mean, it could be 12. I mean, you never know.
You can drink at 12. Now, I don't recall exactly how old I was, but it was during Lent. They had church at noon, and I couldn't have been every day because there should have been school, but at least maybe it was when we were out of school for Easter. But I would go and serve as an altar boy for every day, like I don't know how many days in a row I was off, and so I did see, and that I think helped season me for later. Of course, there are things that either they didn't tell me or I didn't listen to. Probably, as I look back, probably a combination, but likely I didn't listen to some. So with that in the background, I always had that voice. There was never a time that, I guess the best way to say it is, whatever I was out doing, it was like there was always another still small, a section of my brain, my heart, my spirit that wasn't participating in those things. It was like it was outside of that I wasn't necessarily listening to, but I always knew it was there. So after we got married at relatively young age, and Sean was born soon after,
He was born very soon after.
Indeed. That kind of became they became my idol, kind of my God. It was like, I got a family, Got a wife. That's all I need. And, religion is for weak people and needy people. And I know that's not, particularly unique. I don't, and likely anything I say here will not be, but it's, come to find out, it's pretty prophetic. Yeah. It's people that are needy, that are weak, and they have, at some point realized that and gone to the source. But at the time, I was probably not extraordinarily arrogant, but at least above averagely arrogant and prideful. And so for several years after, we didn't go to church. We didn't do anything. And my wife had grown up in the church, in a Baptist tradition. And so when we moved from our hometown, Louisiana, and to North Carolina, I remember nobody ever left there, really. I mean, might be more disparaging than I intend for it to be. It was unusual for folks to leave, especially voluntarily. And we got ready to move, and I remember Blenda and I talking about it feels like this is something happening to us, that we're watching it happen versus participating. But we were doing it. Right. And so we moved to North Carolina, and kind of to set I'll try quickly to set the stage. This is going somewhere. In Louisiana, there is this Protestant versus Catholic choose your battle, and so I had stereotyped, or I had put all the Protestant Baptist, was a lot of Pentecost. I'd put them all in one little category of all the bad stereotypes, and then there was the Catholic Church, which I had developed my own issues there, right. But in my mind that was still the
better one,
the better one. So if you guys get a chance, go back and listen to my wife's podcast on here, so you'll understand a little more of her. But I was still in Louisiana. She found a house that she said, I'm going to sign a purchase agreement on a house. And I said, great, what's it like? She said, I don't know, I haven't been inside. It's going on the market in the morning. I drove through the cul-de-sac, and that's the house I want us to live in. So she did sign it contingent on my approval. Right. And
quote unquote.
That's right. I'm sorry. Y'all didn't see the air quotes. And I approved. But I remember finding out that there was a pastor that lived across the street. And this is where I was in my arrogance was, I honestly said, can we get out of this? I don't want to live across from a pastor. He's going to be in our business. He's going to be asking me to church every week. All I knew was the visitation on Sundays and people showing up at your house. You don't want to be there. And all the stuff that I'd gotten from my parents. And I was like, I don't want to live next to a pastor. So fast forward a little bit, leaving Louisiana, kind of my roots were, everything was kind of wonky for a bit, and all the things that I had built, all my idols, God's in the business of destroying idols, and so he started to do that. Blenda was working and having a career, and I was like, where's purpose? Went to a Methodist church a couple of times. Anyway, we went to church for a bit. It didn't matter where it was. I wasn't listening. We weren't ready for that. I guess I'm going to get into a spiritual lesson here. What was happening is this pastor across the street, Ken Cross, that's really his name, had been meeting with, he's planting a church, and he apparently had been praying for me, but not just with the group for me. He was asking God in the men's group that he was in to say, hey, great guy, he's lost as the day is long. He asked the Holy Spirit, and he asked these guys to pray for him to know just how to approach me. And he didn't know me at all. And I remember meeting him. He had a son close to Sean's age. And I remember I had a driveway, we still do actually, where when it rains, the rocks from the driveway go out in the road in significant quantities. And I didn't know I was getting into that. In Louisiana, everything's flat. Nothing washes anywhere. And so I was out there with a wheelbarrow and a shovel, shoveling rocks. And he just walks over with a shovel, him and Oliver, his son. How you doing? Starts shoveling them with me. Doesn't say anything about church. Doesn't say who he is. And that's not always the right approach. It was the right one for me.
Right.
And so, it was like, all right, you can come help me. I'll allow that. And so we did that for a bit, things like that.
Right.
And, there's different, all churches have different ways of outreach, obviously. But at the time, since they didn't have a building, they were doing backyard Bible clubs where they would send their youth out to the neighborhoods and recruit. And it was like, all right, I'll let my son walk over just so I can still see. So they can't do any, it won't be too bad. So he went to backyard Bible clubs at their house. And at the end of that, there was a party and they all got together out at Lake. And I remember it's like, okay, this is when I'm going to see Ken in his element. And all of a sudden he's going to start, he's going to say God with 3 syllables. He's going to turn into some other different dude. He's not going to be somebody I want to listen to. And I remember being out there and the church people were doing stuff. I said, Ken, shouldn't you be helping? He said, no, they got it. They don't need me. And then Mindi, just to show where I was, after, I don't know, a little while, I went and told Belinda, I said, he won't ask me to church. Not only, it was the other way around. I was like, what's wrong with me? This guy's 8 people in his church. His only job is to get people to come, and he won't ask us. And I almost went in spite of that after all this time. And when we went there for the first time, he was the same guy. He was, just preaching, talking, from preaching the truth in a relatable way. And he is who God used to tear down those stereotypes. Soon after that, they were having small groups or community groups, whatever. And that sounded creepy to me. And
I get that, yeah.
And of all people, Mindi, I honestly said, if they hug me, I'm gone.
Especially you.
Yeah, exactly. I hug strangers. I've got restraining orders. It was like, and so I started going to the life group. Well, in the meantime, God was working, first of all, giving me a place to go,
right,
and taking away the things I was holding on to at the same time. Like any idol, Belinda had kind of become that.
Right.
And Sean may not know some of this, but it was when you squeeze something too tight, you're using it for something it wasn't created to be, and it doesn't matter what it is. I had, and you squeeze tighter and tighter, trying to get more and more from something and it wasn't obviously not fair to her, not fair to anything. So that was going away at the same time. And I remember one Sunday afternoon, for some reason, Ken and I were talking about this recently. He has 5 or 6 kids, whatever. No, I'm sorry. He has, and 5. Hold up. And they were gone for some reason. And I went over to his house across the street, and I said, Ken, nothing feels right, man. I feel off. And I pick on him about it. I said, all your theology, here's was his gospel push. You think God's trying to tell you something? I was like, yeah, I do. And so I prayed in his living room, and I didn't know what to do. I left there like a kid. It's kind of, my feet weren't hardly touching the ground. And I wish someone would have been with me. I went down to the little lake at our house. It's got I don't know why there. I just went for a walk. There was a fishing pole there. Had, and nobody was around. Going to throw it out. It had bait on it. I threw it out and caught a little bass, like a little pound bass. I never caught one since then. And I didn't know what to do then. All this was like this freaky thing that was going on. It was, and I go back to that time a lot. It was just, I don't know, this weird sort of affirmation and just a seal, I guess, on my decision is what it felt like. And so that was, I don't know, I guess Sean was 3 or 4. Anyway, so that was a long time ago, and that's the beginning of it. And I think the rest of this talk will probably shine some light on where we went from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of things, so many thoughts. One off the top, I just want to be an encouragement. Like, there is no mold for becoming a Christian. There just really isn't. No matter where you come from, no matter what's in your background, no matter what's in your family, no matter what's running through your blood, anywhere, everywhere, any religion, no religion, like, you kind of touched on a lot. I mean, Catholicism, you got some Jewish Judaism in your blood. But then you were kind of agnostic at some point. And I mean, you kind of touched lots of different approaches.
Not surprising.
But God used all of that to draw you in. And I love I have a question for Sean in a second, but one thing I think that was most striking to me was how Ken prayed how to approach. I think evangelism today is tricky, more so than I think pretty much all of history. Even I think probably up till like 20 or 30 years ago, you could still sit down with someone and have a conversation and it not be weird, or, you can at least explain the gospel and they could have a reasonable understanding of it in a way that you can say, okay, well, yay or nay, or, let's put a plug in it for the next time. But today it's becoming increasingly difficult, and we're having to kind of peel back so many more layers because words don't mean the same to people anymore. I mean, you're having to define just basic English terms before you can even start to have a conversation with someone. And so that was so powerful to hear for me. Is we need to, it's as simple as that though. It's just pray, ask the Lord, how can I approach this person? And he didn't know you. You just said he didn't know you at all. And so God opened a door. He saw you shoveling rocks and he's like, all right, this is my in, and I'm just going to go, and I'm not going to give the whole presentation, and I'm not going to do all that. I'm just going to be the hands and feet right now. And then God will continue opening doors. So I love that. And I love his confidence in God, because he didn't try to pressure you. He didn't try to he didn't act like it was all on his shoulders to win you over to the Lord. And then if he didn't do it,
set a timetable. He was
no
patient.
timetable. Yeah, that's awesome. So one question that I had for Sean, I know he's talked about this with me a little bit, but I find it interesting because they got married and had Sean very succinctly. So Sean kind of grew up with y'all, and especially in your faith, because he was so young, and then he accepted Christ very young. So I just wanted to ask, babe, what was that like, kind of growing up with your parents, especially in faith?
So we're sharing a microphone here. It's been a little awkward sitting in here.
To be clear, he's not sharing one with me.
That's fair. Yeah. But I think, just I'm used to being, when you're not the one with the microphone, you're used to, and you're in the room, you're used to being as quiet as possible. So I'm like, it's weird to hear my voice. So if you can't hear me, then tell me to do something different. But okay. I mean, I think growing up, looking back, I mean, you don't know any different, right? You're a kid, and like Dad said, we lived across the street from the Crosses, and just we were all buddies. And Oliver being the same age, and then his sisters, whether it was street hockey in the road or finding squirrels in the woods behind their house or playing basketball. It's just kind of where we hung out. And so that was all part, I think coming to faith and the things that were happening and looking back and seeing what God was doing was just kind of part of childhood and part of life. And looking back now, especially at the advanced age that we are.
Thank you for that.
But again, my parents being younger in that season, and just thinking about the things that they were dealing with and going through, and Yeah, I think it's probably a different experience than a lot of kids have when you talk about faith. Like I think about you and your parents and the legacy of faith, if you will, and how they brought you up in that, and how I also got to experience that in a different way with my parents, right? So there's probably some I don't want to say negatives. There's probably some negatives to that, but just I think that's a cool thing to be able to say that you shared with your parents as whether you knew it was happening at the time or not.
Right. Well, that's awesome.
You're taking the mic from me.
I am. I'm taking the mic. You're done. I'll let you know when you can talk again. I'm just kidding.
Go back to my corner.
To be fair, I told you to get another mic before now. So that's the next ministry investment. So, okay. So that was a bit of your story, how you came to Christ. So another question that I always love to ask everyone is, there's a difference between coming to Christ and coming to faith and then starting to really care about the Bible and starting to realize kind of what the Bible is. And so you probably have a whole kind of crazy relationship with the Bible, but when did it start becoming the Bible to you more than just another book?
Yeah. There is some stories in there. First of all, I started at 0 with that. So, and even that, when I look back on it, was, in the providence of God, because I'm a skeptic by nature, not so much with people. I kind of give people their space and then hopefully fill it into what I've already given them. But with other stuff, I can be skeptical and experiential, I think, more so than a learner, and soaking in from that way. So we didn't have Bible. All Bible was to me was Bible stories. And so I didn't know the books. I didn't know what was in it. I didn't know how it came from. I didn't know anything. And one of the funnier stories to a couple that will illustrate my total lack of knowledge, and it's so cool that I'm here with somebody doing biblical literacy when I was the definition of biblically illiterate, and may still fit that in some ways. But we were at church, and Ken was preaching from one of the not one of the Gospels, but one of the letters from Paul. And I remember I leaned over to Belinda, and I promise this is the honest truth, and saying, "Wait a minute." I thought, so when the priest got up to do the sermon and read from he had, he printed out his sermon and he printed out the readings, and it was on paper. Right. I thought it was a copy of the letter, right? I didn't know it was coming from the Bible. I thought it was a copy of the letter that Paul wrote to the church. And they all made copies over the years. They gave it to the Pope, and eventually
it just trickled down.
We got it.
Kind of.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of, yeah. And I was like, wait a minute. Belinda, you guys, that's coming from honest truth. Might as well just be totally transparent. No. So that's one. And then it was kind of cool, and I'll go back to being experiential, is by that time in life, I had experienced a lot of things. And to read the instruction manual after things had kind of been put together a bit was even more affirming, because I knew that I hadn't modified my behavior, my thinking. I haven't done anything because I had learned it and thought that's the way I was supposed to live. I had seen those things as being true, and then I read where it came from. And I read, so the reason it's true is because the owner wrote the manual and gave it to me afterwards. Or I saw it afterwards. And so it was, I had Belinda, and I've heard you say the same thing. I'm very thankful, but we would have, life group at our house or small group, and I would read something and give some insights. And Belinda said, where did you get that? You haven't read, you don't know. And I said, it's just that I've seen it. I've felt that this is it. And I'm just, this is just more affirmation after the fact and so, that was kind of where I started with that. But I remember, right after I became a Christian, and I'm yelling down from upstairs and say, Belinda, I just stumbled across 1 Corinthians. I said, have you ever seen anything like this about love? This is it. This is everything, And she was like, what are you reading? And I said, she said, oh, the love chapter. And I said, whatever. What I'm saying is, this is the most amazing thing I've ever read about love. And so it was really exciting in a childlike sort of naive way for a while. And then another thing that's a little more serious is when I was struggling, I was a salesman, and Ken would ride with me. He just ride around. He said, mind if I just ride with you? He'd sit in the car while I went, and we didn't have phones at the time, so he wasn't on the phone. He would sit in a car while I went in and did my thing, come back out. But everything that I was struggling with, or everything I brought up, he could go to the Bible reference. I was saying, this is a mess. I feel like I want to do this all the time. And he was saying, no temptation has come except for what's common to man. And I was like, really? Not just me. And then, it would be, then I had some of the, childhood, which could be quotes, Catholic guilt that I had taken on. And he was like, well, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Mm-hmm. Everybody. And so, I guess that was part of kind of what early on, added, the depth and, to the Bible, when you kind of overlaid and the experiences I'd already had.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool because I grew up in it. I grew up in the church. I knew the Bible like very early on. So it helped shape my whole worldview. But to see someone come to Christ a little bit later and it to just affirm and make everything make sense, because it does make everything make sense, and things that you have questions about and you read and you're like, right. Or I never thought about it that way. That's actually really smart. Or so it's really fun. It's like, it's the box of the puzzle, right? So you have been putting the puzzle together and figuring things out. And then you finally see the picture and you're like, that makes so much more sense. Yeah. And this is why this goes here. And this is why this happens. And this is why this works out. So that's really, really cool. And I always just love hearing answers to that question because all of our introductions to understanding what scripture is, well, we continue to do so because you said you were, that childlike giddy. I still am childlike giddy over the Bible. Like I read things all the time that I'm like, what? Like I'm doing slowly working through Exodus right now, but the 10 Commandments, like I've known the 10 Commandments since I was like 3, and it just doesn't seem all that exciting anymore, but I'm actually studying it like in depth for the first time. It is blowing my mind.
Be careful with that. You're going to learn.
But really, you think 10 Commandments, that's like basic, and it's blowing my mind. Anyway, so I love that. And I know we're going to probably talk about this a little bit more, but well, actually you kind of did a good job. My next question was, at what points along the way did you struggle in faith? But you kind of answered that, like getting to it. Yeah. Did you have anything else to add right now? Just
quickly, after I became a Christian, my struggles in faith were when things had just gotten out of priority. Church became the, because I'd, come to faith with Ken. He was my guy. We were going to build this church and whatever it took, and so that became my thing, church versus, and it can be whatever.
Right.
And so just looking back, the times like most people that I've struggled with faith is when I had allowed, other things into the space that only God has. And I don't read much, but usually I could read The Pursuit of God, the first 3 or 4 chapters. And, that was kind of my recalibration a lot of times, to kind of go back because, he talks a good bit about, the blessedness of possessing nothing and the things that you have taken into the spot that only God dwells in, and that he's the jealous God. He's not going to leave them there.
Commandments numero uno and dos.
Yeah. So anyways, those are the times.
We all can relate to that every single day for sure. Okay, well, let's make a little bit of a transition. So you are currently walking through a pretty challenging valley right now, and that is cancer, the diagnosis, which unfortunately I feel like is just becoming increasingly a thing for so many people. It's
Yeah.
nasty little demon fingers are touching so many families.
That's a great way of putting it.
And people. But before we get into that, describe your life and your relationship with God just prior to the diagnosis.
Yeah, that is a great question. I was just prior to that, looking back, I feel like God was already putting the things in place in my life in order to give me everything I needed to walk through this. I had found a church that the people were loving and sweet, and I was kind of seeing faith traditions from a different perspective, and it was seasoning what I had learned before. And because we had kind of gone through COVID, and with the reset, and decided to move from the church we were at and got on a side, if I can wander off.
Oh, yeah.
It was scary how easy it was to get out of relationships and out of going to church. We went from backyard church to online church to why don't we make breakfast and have church to we can have a mimosa and have breakfast and lunch church to why don't we just skip the church part? And then I remember thinking, this is not sustainable. We can't do this. So, coming from that, we were looking around for a bit, and things had started to get really settled there, where I had enough of a base in this
Right.
in this tradition to be able to and the people in place to handle this. I didn't know it at the time, but
Right.
if it would have been a year or so before, we would have still been in this wonky sort of unsettled place, and this would have been. I can't imagine getting the news a year prior, I guess is my
Right.
point.
Right. Well, you had gone through some career transitions and stuff too. I
Yeah.
feel like the last few years have been lots of transitions. So
Yeah, things that should have been okay, looking back, that weren't, and trying to see why and what I missed
Right.
in those decisions. But that's another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. See, you're already setting the stage for episode 2. See, you're good at this, Matt. Okay. Well, yeah, and that's always interesting, no matter who I talk to and what the story is. Hindsight's 2020. And when you can look back, you can see God moving pieces together that you had no idea that you were going to need. So tell us about the initial shock of that diagnosis.
Yeah.
How did it come about? What was your initial reaction to it? And then we'll get into how challenging it was, or how long did it take you to really grasp kind of what was going on in different perspectives?
Yeah, I have thought a good bit about that as we were going through it. Now I can, a few months out, I can look back and see, maybe make some more sense of it. But, I was, first of all, I'm not sick. I feel fine. I felt fine the whole time. And I'm very thankful for that. So it didn't come from, any particular, symptom. I had a couple of days of unusual,
Stuff.
but no big deal. And then, that kind of prompts some further investigation, like 5 things. And the first 3 were negative. And of course they were, because nothing's wrong with me.
Right.
And then, I went the last couple of tests. And so when I actually found out that day, I was in the doctor's office. He was doing a procedure, and he said, you could see from the camera and the scope, he said, this is not good. You have bladder cancer. I do a lot of bladder cancer surgeries, but I won't do this one. I'm referring you to UNC.
Oh,
That was his statement.
brief.
And so I, got dressed, finished getting dressed, went to the bathroom, came back out, and he was gone. And so I went down to the receptionist, and she said, yeah, I got your request for referral. We'll send it in to you. And so 2 minutes later, I'm in the car, no questions, no conversation, nothing. And so the first thing, there's lots of different cancers. I never heard of bladder cancer. So I quit Google, just to see, is this a thing or it's not a thing? Because it could have been, 90% of the people get it, they're good in 2 days, or
Right.
you know,
Well, yeah.
you know, you're not
Yeah.
gonna make it home.
Right.
And by the way, it's always that way
Well,
on the
yes.
internet. Right?
Yeah.
So,
On the internet. Yeah. That's not
but
what
I could
you should
tell
do.
pretty quickly in a few seconds that it was a thing. You know, it popped up, you know, recurrence rates, survival rates, all the stuff. So didn't go there then. I didn't call Belinda. I drove home and told her, that. And, you know, first of all, you know, I've had surgeries. Everything that's happened to me so far has been because of poor choices. So, you know, every scar and surgery that I've had up to this point was, you know, I could pretty well track it down to a decision or two that I had made in haste.
Flipping a golf cart. You know,
Right.
fine.
And so no, this was out of nowhere. And there was my initial reaction for some reason, and I don't know if it's common or not. I didn't go to, you know, I'm going to fight, I'm going to beat it, I'm going to be everything. My initial reaction is I've got to be prepared to not be okay. For some reason, that was what was on my, I have to be okay with dying. And I believe that was, I believe that was prompting of God, not to stay there,
Right.
but I felt like
Right.
that I've used this analogy a few times. I felt like I'd been studying for a test. I knew it was coming, and they passed it out, and I wrote my name and date on it, and I didn't know any of the answers. And I was like, well, what's wrong? I know what I'm studying is right. I know
Right.
I've been studying the answers, but I don't feel like I know them well enough to pass this test. And so it got to thinking, I never doubted faith. I never doubted that. It was, what was I doing or not doing, or how was I not doing things that would allow that for me to take that test and write the answers in. And I have to go back and rethink the way that, you know, I've been a bit, and I needed to do it answering that question first. And people were saying, you know, we'll check this out, we'll get this done. And I wouldn't allow that to really be my main thought until I had said, am I okay? Because that's a question, obviously, we need to answer anyway. And I had an
Right.
opportunity to answer it when I'm not necessarily facing it,
Right.
knowing that I am going to be facing
Right.
it as we all are. So it took away the coping that we let come in, the distractions, the things that keep us from living in the reality of our mortality here. And just, I felt like I needed to go to that spot before I could start thinking about, all right, let me get well.
What's the game plan? Right.
Yeah, what's the game plan? So that was the first, couple of weeks, honestly, was, and people, it wasn't great to be around. It wasn't horrible, but I wouldn't allow people to be too positive because I needed to
work through it.
I needed to work through that. So, that was kind of the initial reaction. And I know, as a good host, the next question is, what sorts of things did you
Right.
did you start doing? I've never been quiet time discipline. I didn't do those things, and it was like the next morning, and it wasn't like making a deal or anything. It was just, I needed to go and add the things in that have been missing in order to be well in this area. So, one of the first things I did was start with a morning prayer liturgy. That's, I needed to follow that every day. There's an evening that I've been doing, some things we're doing at night to listen to, but mainly it's some of the Book of Common Prayer prayers. I found myself being drawn to some of the older written out sort of prayers. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
And I would have probably just run over them and said, hey, why can't they use the language I want to hear. And then there's, readings from the Psalms, Old Testament, New Testament, and then some prayer time. And those things have been, almost immediately, God, was blessed those times and the things I was learning in there. And so that's, that was the levels was, you've got to be okay with this because, like I say, not just for this time, for, this is the way it's going to go.
Right.
And likely.
Right.
And all the things that are associated with that, you have to go through that, whether it's, your role, loved ones, afterlife, the things that, that ride along with this new reality.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's not a new reality. It's a new recognition of an existing
That's fair.
of reality.
It's the method.
That's right.
The method.
Right.
That's good. So that's interesting because what I just see is God immediately said, tune into me. Tune into me. Tune into me. And the fact that in the morning, and I'm sure multiple times throughout the day and at night, like that's one good thing, quote unquote, good thing that comes from facing hard times is because it consumes you. And especially something like a diagnosis that comes out of nowhere when you weren't sick and you weren't feeling bad and all this other stuff. Like there were no signs, like big signs before. So when something like that hits you, it takes a while to process that. And I love how he immediately just grabbed hold of you and you're like, tune into me. I'm going to be your focus during this time. And this is what we're going to do. And I love how you were drawn to older prayers, especially knowing your personality.
Yeah.
But I also find that providential and beautiful because these prayers and kind of when you get into some of that old liturgy and stuff like that, like they lived in a much more difficult time.
Yeah.
I mean,
they were more comfortable with that.
And they were far more comfortable with their mortality because it was more of a thing.
Yeah.
I
they
mean,
were seeing it in front of them. It was happening in their house. It was happening in the streets.
Infant mortality rates were higher, sicknesses. You couldn't go to a hospital and expect to be made well. And they were much more okay with that. So they lived in this realm. And so I think that's why we're drawn to these two. They're far more powerful because that's just the world that they lived in. In fact, I heard a doctor say when COVID was starting to become a thing, he's like, what's freaking people out, it's just a new way to die. Like death happens every day in a million different ways. And if you get killed by a car, it's okay. Well, that's being killed by a car. It stinks, but that's what that is. But this is new. And so that's what's freaking people out. And so this was new to you though. And I know we just had conversations. You guys had a loved one pass away a couple of March, April.
My first symptoms were on the trip to that funeral.
Seriously. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So she passed away from cancer. That was very rapid. But you guys had just talked about how you didn't have any cancer in your family. And so this was just like all hitting all at once. But I did just love that. It just seems like God was like, okay, you need to tune into me. You need to figure out what's most important, be okay with it. And then just kind of, I guess, being reintroduced to reality and what like reality is, and like reminding all of us, this isn't home. This isn't home yet. And kind of reorienting your thoughts to that. Now, this one is going to transition to where I kind of want Sean to pick up too, but it's one thing to process it yourself. It's quite another thing to process it as a husband.
Yeah.
And as a father and as a friend and as an employee. So once you kind of got through this between you and God, just kind of personally and individually, how did you process it? Okay, well, I'm not just me. Like I impact other people.
Yeah. The first thing is just a recognition that the illusion that we all know of control, and that I am influencing these people's lives to the extent that I think I am,
Right.
probably not quite as much as I think. That they'll be okay. They'll be okay. I always tell them, Linda, you'll be all right. That I'm not your ultimate caretaker, and you'll be fine. I look at you too. And the first thing I did was take an inventory of my family and say, Sean and Mindy, Ellen, my middle daughter, has a wonderful husband, William. My younger daughter has a great husband, Cameron, Mary and Cameron. And that they each have someone, and they're gonna do their life. God's gonna be with them. They're gonna be fine. Yeah. And that was, I guess, the first realization is this, sort of, and guys will, everybody does, but you'll take on that. I have a more responsible, more of a say so in the way these folks are going to be than what I really do. So that was my first thing, is just to tell myself, and rightfully, that everybody will be all right.
Right.
And then it was, after that, it's say, okay, what is my role then? And we'll talk about that in a bit. But it was, if it's not to make sure they're okay, then I have to see, what the next things for me are in each of those roles. And so I guess, that's kind of where I got to comfortably, is, and it was a pretty peaceful place, is to know that everybody will be fine.
Eventually. Fine is a relative term, but so I wanted to ask Sean, you're the oldest by a long shot. And this came obviously as a shock to all of us too. Like, it obviously was a shock to Matt, but it was a shock to us too. And I obviously vividly remember when you told me. So I want you to talk about kind of hearing that and your reaction to it, and what kind of your process, how you process this whole thing as son, as the only son, as the oldest, as just, a person in general.
It's patriarch. That's not the right word.
No, he's the patriarch.
Yeah, close enough. As I awkwardly lean over again to your microphone.
You love me, so it's okay.
That's right. I guess a couple of thoughts. One, and I think Dad said it well. It brings into focus mortality, right? I mean, that's it's the first thing that comes to mind. You also don't know what you don't know. My personality doesn't do well with that.
No.
I like control. It's definitely a character flaw more than it is a strength. But I think the waiting is challenging and probably edifying at the same time, because if you don't have the information, you don't know exactly what's happening. All you can do is trust in the one that does have that information. I think it's also been good and to extent processing, and again what Dad was talking about with just maybe prioritization, right? And what things are important. I actually just read something, I'm trying to think of the name of the book. It's one I'm reading on Everand now, whatever that app is called that I steal from my mother. I'm 38 years old and I steal books from my mother's subscription. So sorry, Everand people, if you're listening to this, I steal that and my parents' YouTube TV. But it's the Catholic roots, I guess, which I also just kind of dawned on me too. I think it's interesting that we never went to Catholic mass that I'm aware of.
No, we didn't.
I thought you were just wiping my head there, pulling me back to the microphone. I apologize. So anyway, I guess, it's built into me a little bit to go to confession, but was reading in a book recently that talked about, our society and distractions and all the things that pull for our attention, but how we're hungry for that because we're trying to distract ourselves from the reality of eternity.
Yeah.
And he's like, that can be, for a believer, that means one thing. For a non-believer, that means something else. But we're doing it kind of for the same reasons. And so just take an inventory of the things that are important, and certainly not doing that perfectly, but that's a good thing, I think, to stop and look around and say what things matter. So, relationally, obviously, with my dad, with my parents, with my siblings, thinking through that, but also knowing, and for all of us, this isn't the end. And while my hope and prayer and belief is that we're not having, right. We're not near that. If we were for some reason, that's not the end. And I think, and I talk about this with people all the time, and we talked about it in our community group a few weeks ago, but how people get out of bed in the morning without that assurance and without that faith. I don't know how people function without it. And so, I think part of it too, knowing, my parents, but especially my mom, and, how solid, her faith is, and knowing that, yes, this is hard on her too, obviously, but, just knowing that the reality and the baseline that we're all coming from, we're all speaking the same language of things that, in eternal words, just mean more and carry more weight. Right. So I don't know if that answered your question at all. My side's kind of getting numb. So
yes, you
was
did.
I supposed to do something else?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. I mean, it was, so it's very hard, but it is reorienting, and it's reorienting to the one who we need to be reoriented to, because when you can go only a few number of ways when you hit news like that. When you get news like that, you're either going to grow closer to God and lean into him, or you're going to run away. You're going to deny, you're going to be angry, you're going to blame, you're going to, again, the denial, pretending like nothing's wrong or whatever. So, it does get, very challenging, but that's one thing that I really appreciated about, just this family, and both of you, especially as the men of this family, because you are leaders and you can be humble, and that's good. And everyone's going to be fine, but you do play an instrumental role in our lives as the leaders of our homes and as the leaders of our family. So to watch both of you, handle this so well and be so strong, not perfect, and not, without, I don't know, cracks and all this other stuff. But to see you guys just be so steady has been really awesome for me. I can't speak for anybody else, some of you listening may know this, but Sean and his dad are very close. They're very, very, very close. And so I have been watching, from my removed perspective over here, of just, how Sean was going to process this, because his dad is his best friend. And so, but just both of you being so steady and being so strong and leaning into the Lord has done more for us, especially me. Again, I won't speak for everybody, but that you could possibly know. And so you do have influence, and even in the way that you handle hardships and handle valleys, it's a really big deal. And so I want to thank both of you for being strong and for walking in the Lord. And even when you don't think it's a big deal, people are watching, and especially think of our daughters and your granddaughters. Yeah. We have 4 little girls who are watching you guys walk through this, and they don't know the ramifications of it, and they don't know the possibilities, and they shouldn't. But watching you guys handle this, especially together and as even from distance, has been really encouraging. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. And Mindi, I think this is a good place to talk about, just really quickly. When people say, well, how are Belinda and the kids handling it? And it was, the answer is as expected, according to each of their personalities, right? And I love it. Belinda has mothered me. She's taken on this with me. We both have spouses with cancer, and we both have cancer. It's we were sharing these roles, and I had to think about that. Recently, she had a little deal where she needed to be in the emergency room, and it was like God gave that to me to see what it looks like for somebody to put a needle in her arm. I hate that.
Right.
And so I got to see through her eyes what she's seeing with me, and so we are in the same spot. It's not like one of us has a worse burden in this or a bigger challenge. We have the same one, you know, and she'll love this when she hears it. Every night but one, she's been great. She kind of went off into the folly of her imagination one night about, I met you when I was 13. We got married at 17. There's no me without you. And, so we had to go through that. And then Sean's quiet. He's steady. He's internalizing it. He's going to look it up some. He's going to know what's going on more so than what he says. Ellen, extremely empathetic. She's researching it. She joined the same cancer forums that we joined. She has her little username in there. We're reading the same. She's replying. She's there. Mary wants to come and be with me when things aren't going well. And Dad, you'll be fine. We'll take care of this. And, being encouraging. And so each of them are responding appropriately according to their personalities. And it's been entertaining and and really, really cool to see. So.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. So, but I do want to, so part of my commitment to ministry and just to life in general is being honest, because I think we like to just kind of sweep things under the rug sometimes and don't like to talk about like hard things other than just totally brushing it off or sweeping under the rug. So along this journey, and part of, I think, what makes cancer so difficult is because there's so many unknowns and it's so different for every person, and the journey it never looks the same for any one person. And so in your particular journey, we were hoping that this would be a speed bump in your life, right? We were hoping like, well, there's a little tumor, like they can go in and they can just get it out and then it'll be fine and we won't have to worry about it anymore. And that was that. But every single kind of step along the way, it's not been the worst news, but it's never been the best news either. So we've gotten quite a bit. I feel like there's every single time there is news to be had, it's not been the best news that we were hoping for or praying for. So kind of describe these moments as you have, and it wasn't undue optimism either. I feel like even doctors were very optimistic about things, and then we get results back and they're not as good as what they were hoping. So kind of walk us through that. And Sean mentioned the patience aspect as well. Just having to be patient, but wait for the knowledge. We can't do anything. We can't wrap our minds around it till we have that knowledge. So kind of walk us through that journey a little bit, and how you've been dealing with that.
Sure. And great perspective that you've insight that you have to even ask these questions. Those are great questions. Overall, and this is going to sound cliche, is I have everything I need to do this well, including getting these decisions, these results. People praying for me at work and hugging me and church. I've got a, 83-year-old wonderful priest friend of mine that is fasting. He's only eating 3 hours in a day for 2 weeks at a time. And, yesterday, I was cruising through town in my wife's Mini Cooper convertible, which whenever my testosterone gets too high, I drive that to make it fair for everybody, all the other guys. And so I was doing that. I came over the hill. I recognized somebody over the railroad tracks in our little town. He stops me, leans through the convertible. I don't know how he knows. He said, "I'm praying for you," and gave me a hug and told me he loved me. And, traffic backed up. Through the top of the car, and I drive off. And so that's the backdrop for everything, everything I'm going to say, all this news. you're right. The first one was, let's do a biopsy. And we'll say if it's low grade. Well, it was high grade.
Right.
Of course, I remember where I was when I got that, playing cards, eating dinner. Pops up on my chart, electronically. Got this little warning saying, hey, doctors haven't looked at this. If you don't want to see it, don't look at it.
Well, of course, yeah.
and I was like, well, of course you're going to look
Of
at it.
course.
And you're in this weird sort of in space because what's written there.
Right.
In one way, it changes everything. In another, it doesn't change anything.
Right.
Right. It's like, this is where it's written, but this isn't the thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's, if I'm going to believe what I say, then
Right.
this is going to be all right, regardless of what this says. And on the other thing, I'm reading this out loud with friends and using the words that I didn't want to have to use.
Right.
The second one was, when they said, okay, we're going to do the surgery, take the tumor out. The doctor says there's nothing visible left, but we're going, I keep my bladder. Just take this tumor out. But the pathology, the tissue is the issue, right? And so the margins come back and say there is a microscopic cancer left in a couple of spots. So reading those results, it was like lymph nodes negative, this negative, positive here, positive here. So you're reading them out loud one at a time, wondering what the next thing's going to be.
Right. Well, and then each of these two, I mean, this was days in between each of these. And then surgeries, you had to wait 6 weeks for surgery. And then, so it was that waiting. So it's easy to kind of rehash it. But in hindsight, because you're like, oh, we got the results and but like, it was tough to wait. That's a great point.
There are spaces and times in there where you're, and it really is about, I remember even after the first day, now that I think about it, it's like you think you get life-ending, sort of, not life-ending, but life-altering news. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, now what?
Right.
And people, all the things, you're like, well, what are you doing at work? It's like, well, I mean, I got a day. I got to be somewhere. I gotta
the
go.
world doesn't just stop.
It doesn't. And so it does, like Sean was saying, it rearranges your priorities, it put things in different perspective. But the fact is, you get up and do your thing.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of weird. Because you're like, I'm going to do something that really doesn't matter.
Right.
But it matters the same as it did before.
Right.
I just have it in its right spot now.
Right.
And so you're right. Those in between all those were those sorts of days.
Right.
And then a little bit of a tough one is there was a few days they thought I was a candidate for a treatment that would be bladder sparing, still be difficult, be chemo, radiation, but that I would, go through that and have a chance of, and they were going to put it through the tumor board and do a review, and then came back a few days later and said, no, we need to take, your bladder, all your innards in there that you don't absolutely have to have. So I said, well, let me get a second opinion. The same thing came back there. Mm-hmm. So those few days somehow were the hardest. I started to think, maybe I will be able to not have something as drastic.
Yeah.
And then finally had to let that go and say, no, this is what this means for us. This is our journey. This is the way this is going to look. And let's schedule the surgery and go and do that. But no, you're right. These are these surreal sort of moments that there's like a singularity of what doesn't matter and what does matter, what's not important and what is important. It all kind of comes together, and you're sitting there at your table reading these results. And
but even you got the official go ahead to have the surgery.
I didn't know if you wanted to go into that or not.
Well, I mean, but this is like real life though. Like he was, how many days though, before you're supposed to have the surgery, how many days were between you realizing you have to have the surgery to remove your bladder and then the surgery date? which ended up getting changed, but like it wasn't long.
No. So just a couple of weeks after finding this out for sure that I was going to get it out, they got me in really quick because surgical dates are difficult.
Right.
These are robotic surgeries. I'm doing it at a I'm gonna say prestigious, a well-known institution, and they said no, we can do it on November 7th. And it's like, wow, that's. Yeah, I'm getting my dates right. Yeah.
No, that was
October 16th.
I'm sorry. October 16th. November
was the
7th is the
first
next
one,
one. I'm sorry. I'm focused on that. Yeah, on October 16th, correct.
Yes.
And so it's like, great. They said, one last hurdle. By the way, did you know that 60% of the IV fluids in the U.S. is made outside of Asheville, and that plant is down until the end of the year? I said, no, I didn't. And they called me and said, no, we got past that. You're good. So the 16th was on a Wednesday. The surgeon calls me himself on Sunday, 3 days ahead of time, and said, I just got news that, I have 8 surgeries this week. 4 got postponed, including yours, and we don't know when you're going to have it. And somebody, one of my middle daughter's friends said that we handled it like we do. We're like, well, let's go to the beach. Because we weren't going to be able to go. It was our beach week.
Right.
And we had just canceled it. And it was like, well, call and see if the condo is still available. So anyway, we went to the beach. I don't think I am back filling this in. It felt too quick to me. The surgeon said from my previous surgery, the surgeon had said, 4 weeks, we can do that. But I didn't feel healed.
right.
I would have done it, obviously.
Right.
And then... And so, it's given me a few more weeks to heal. Hopefully the cancer that's left is just kind of chilling, waiting.
Right.
And by the way, no one knows. They do not know.
Right.
They say, well, does it matter? And it's like, no, a few weeks don't matter. And it's like, a few years does, a few weeks don't. When does it?
Well, right.
No one knows.
Where's the line that would matter?
By the way, I have entered this world of they don't know.
Well, and that's the crazy thing about all of this, and I think why it's such a scary word is because it really makes you understand that only God does, and only He is in control. Because you can get the smartest people on planet Earth who know the most about it, and it's a guessing game. And that's why you have all these boards of people consulting with each other to come up with even the next step. Because you're like, well, I don't know. Let's talk about it and see what we think makes the most sense. But even then, it's an educated guess. So, which sounds awfully defeatist, and I'm not trying to negate the medical field, but because you've been taken very well care of. But so in these moments, you're getting these tough moments. What passages of scripture or what has God continued to bring back to you?
He has, there's always, be where your feet's at, all the things, be present, all those things. But, and this is kind of, it really is, this is the day that the Lord has made. And different ways of saying it. It's coming out in different Psalms. Psalms I would have never read.
Right.
I mean, there's this, they come up, it's a 60 or 90 day, whatever. And whatever comes on, I'm reading about people doing unspeakable things to each other in the Old Testament that I would have never read.
I just texted Sean. I'm reading through Kings right now.
Oh, yeah.
And Samuel and about David and like what they did. Like, I'm like, and I read mostly right before I go to bed for that particular kind of devo. And I'm like, I don't need it. And I'm a very visual, like, I'm like,
And then the next day it says, is it not written in the book of Kings? And then they'll read that one from
Yes.
King. You're like, oh gosh, I got to hear it again. So I asked a spiritual advisor of mine. He said, I can't explain it all right now. Just think of it as evil. The things God's
there
doing.
you go. It's just,
the things He's doing is to defeat evil.
it's just that, yeah.
And when He does
exactly.
something, it's to show His goodness. And that's it.
There,
All right, I can go
I
that.
can wrap my mind with that.
So there is, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let's be here now. And really that's all that we were ever, from the manna to our daily bread. I mean, that's where we're at. So that's that's come up a lot. There are some specific ones at other times. A lot of times Belinda will send me one or it'll come up. The one for this week, it was interesting, it was for Mark 1, 30 and 31. It was Simon's mother-in-law had a fever and he took about her. But here's what she said at the end. He said, and he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. So Belinda's prayer was, come Jesus, take our hands, lift us up, let the cancer leave us, and we will serve you and your people. I'm in a little congregation that's about serving others, and it's a good time for that because that was my gift that I haven't been paying as much attention to. And so it is, and again, it's not bartering or with God. It's I want to serve and do your will through these eyes for as long as I can. I have new eyes. I have new perspective. I'd like to do it this way for a while if I could.
Right.
Because it's going to look different than it did.
Right.
And and then I was writing the other day on the way to work, listening, and I guess I had never heard this, but it was from Matthew with the blind man came and said, Jesus, do you believe that what Jesus said to them whenever the men came to him, his first question said, do you believe that I'm able to do this? Basically, do you think I can do this? And they said, yes. And then he touched their eyes saying, according to your faith. I read all that, but I guess I never heard the direct question from him. His first question is, do you believe that I am able to do this? And so people have been praying for my healing and, other things. And until recently, I couldn't. I wouldn't go there. It was more, again, I had to be prepared for the worst. But I can now. I can say, no, I believe you're able to do this. And I believe you're able to heal me. And if it's this last surgery and this is the way it takes, or if it's immunotherapy afterwards, or, whatever, I believe that you're able to heal me.
Right.
And,
well, there's another time he asked in John, do you want to be made well?
Oh, yeah.
And that's always been such a powerful question to really think about. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. Well, no, to find out the desires of their heart.
Well, right. Exactly.
And then the last one, a lot of the Psalms at different times, you're like, wait a minute, did that just say that? And I go back and listen to it again. But Psalm 91, at night, there's always you're quiet. The first few nights, I wasn't sleeping a lot. I didn't want to eat, just kind of processing it all. But one of the things from Psalm 91, it says, he'll cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you'll find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. But then it says, you will not fear from the terror of the night, or the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalked in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. So basically, you'll not fear for any of those things. And so yeah, I guess a couple from the New Testament, and a lot of times from Psalms.
Yeah, I love that. So, what version are you reading from?
ESV.
ESV. What did that one guy call ESV?
Episcopal something.
Episcopal something. It's not Episcopal something. So Psalm 91 has always been really powerful for me too. I'd read it when I was like afraid at night or something like that. But I love that this is the day that the Lord has made. And I think there's just such a good reminder to all of us, no matter what we're going through, good or bad, or just A-okay. We have today.
Yeah.
We have right now. We're not guaranteed tomorrow at 5:00. We're not guaranteed today, 3 hours later. Like we have right now. How are we using it for the Lord? Are we being present with him? And are we doing that? And so I love how just, again, he reoriented your perspective to him. And he's like, you're right, you're going to do it differently. And you might be doing the same things, as far as you might be going to work the same that you were before. You might be serving people in the same way that you were before. You might be having relationships in the way with friends that you were before. But the motivation and the perspective behind it has drastically and forever shifted into a more eternal awareness of this is what I'm actually doing it for.
And I have, I think I can, I know that I can still say this honestly. I've been making sure I have little check marks, but I I wouldn't want to go back to June 30th spiritually, and I wouldn't want to go back and miss the way that I see things now, and not see those that way. And again, we all read, we try to do it, and I pray that there's other ways.
Right.
This is the way for me.
Right.
And but I can honestly say that I wouldn't go back to June 30th, spiritually and perspective wise.
Well, and one thing that you were talking about, especially like, again, Matt, if you're not picking up on this, is like really big in relationships. He's got lots of friendship. Like, he is a relational person. But one thing that struck me that you said, babe, a while ago. So Matt, before you were talking about how God brought you community, like that solid church community, especially after a few years of floating with COVID and just a bunch of other stuff that was going on. And then we also were kind of floating in community. So we're 4 hours away from each other, but we're going through kind of a very similar thing. But what we have recently started a community group, and Sean, we do for prayer time, we do one praise and one request, except for once a month we kind of just dedicate the whole time to prayer. But one thing, do you want to share? Do you know where I'm going with this? You have no idea. You shared, well, the request was for your dad, and it's been for your dad ever since. But one thing that you said was, I have not really talked about this with anybody because I never really felt like I had a community to do that actually cared. Yeah. And so kind of just, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't know if anything terribly value added, except for kind of like Dad was saying, of maybe a season of preparation and a smaller sense that God has brought that to us now, right? So we're in we're at a church. It's physically a little bit further away from us than what we would prefer, and that has some logistical challenges. But even the relationships that we're building there in the community, that you can be transparent with, people that say, I'll be praying for that, I'll be praying for you, and know that they actually will, right? So I think there's that. I think there's a few friendships for us specifically that have grown over the last probably 8 months or so, of people that genuinely care about us. That, again, not that we didn't necessarily have that before, but it wasn't as evident as it is now. And so being able to step into some of those spaces with people, and even this community group of frankly strangers, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, that already, the group itself walking through some heavy life stuff together, right? So, it's been encouraging.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to touch on that really quick because it just dawned on me that you guys God had been preparing you before, and then God had been preparing us to kind of walk through. I mean, anyway, it was just really cool to see the sovereignty of God doing that. So, I am going to just do a couple more questions. Okay. So you're getting ready for like the big surgery, which is coming up in a few days. Is there anything different that God has been kind of putting on your heart with this one? Or, because this is obviously pretty major. Yeah.
You're just getting good at them now.
Or you're getting good at them now.
Yeah. There is, honestly, is because this one will have some, forever sorts of, the way that I biologically operate will be different. And so I've had to deal with that, to think about what that means. And it was really cool being here with you guys today, because this is a great example. We get up at home, we pack up, drive, get some coffee, of course, stop at Buc-ee's.
It's not a shout out. Well, for him, it was, I don't know, after I started being crazy.
Didn't buy anything. And then we come here, laugh with you guys, go on a boat ride, beautiful, come back home. And this kind of goes for not just me and where I'm at now. So this is why I think it's worth the time to talk about is what would be different for this day in 3 months? What is this day if you take it and move it forward for me, I could have done everything I did today, I could have done. Unless I'm mopey and whiny and I don't have the right perspective.
Right. Yeah.
And that's for us tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you're just grumpy, or if something's going on at work, or if it's one of your kids not acting right, or whatever it is, it's the same.
Right.
It's what's different for today. What can happen here? That's not innocent. And that's what I keep going back to is like, okay, this is terrible. I'm going to wake up. Everything's going to hurt, and I'm going to have this stuff to deal with.
Right.
And then I'm going to get up and walk around. A few days, I'll get out of the hospital, and then this day in the future, what's going to be different? Unless, like I say, unless I'm whiny and mopey and feeling sorry for myself, nothing.
Right.
And again, it doesn't just apply in this situation. It's really our choice every day.
Right.
And when I say it's not our choice, it's our choice to develop the habits to stay doing the things we ought to do in order to keep us in that perspective.
Yep.
So that's what's different about
I will
this.
say what I hope is different 3 months from now is no cancer. That would be.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's that.
Let's yes. Let's just speak that loudly.
I'll trade some semi unnecessary parts for no cancer.
Right. Exactly. And get that out for good. Okay, so I have a few more questions, but I'm going to be picky and choosy because I feel like you've covered a couple of them.
Okay.
I think you've covered what you've been thankful for, for sure. A prayer, I'm imagining one prayer that you've been repeating. Well,
This is not going to be very unique, but I am loving the Lord's Prayer. I couldn't fast for myself when other people were fasting, so I just set a timer on the top of every hour to say the Lord's Prayer, and then say what some people call the Jesus Prayer. It's Lord Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so I keep going back to those. Plus, reading some of the old prayers, but I'm just loving the Lord's Prayer, and I just stop it. Give us today our daily bread.
Yeah.
And so that's where I've been. That's where I've been kind of resting.
Yeah, I love that. We say that every night with our girls. It is something that, again, like the 10 Commandments. You just go. It's just the most profound.
Y'all need to do that on the podcast. I love the Furby little girl version of the Lord's Prayer.
It's special. Okay, so I do want you to answer this one. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling right now in a valley?
Sure, and I guess we're in a Christian podcast, and we all are, but I probably have to separate it to somebody who's a believer or a non-believer. If they're not, if they're not, and they're in a valley, it's obviously it's the time to see what they're basing their life on, and to ask those 5 whys to where they get down to the core of their beliefs and find out what's there. And so obviously you would encourage them to look at what they've built their life up to now and see if it's sustaining them during this time. And would bet if they're honest with themselves it's not. So probably a time to talk about that. If they are, and they've been a believer for any length of time, there are Ebenezers in their life, whether they recognize it or not, places that God's have acted in the past. Spend some time looking back. Spend some time to the times, and maybe they've been fortunate they haven't. We've all kind of at least peered into the abyss or known people that has. And where was God then?
Right.
And what did he do for you then? And use that for some faith going forward. So I spent some time doing that. There were times for silly reasons that I felt just this undone.
Right.
I hate to say it.
Right.
I wish it wasn't, but looking back on it, they were silly. It might have been a presentation. It could have been whatever. Sean had a twitch when he was a kid. We were worried about him having
Look how that turned out.
Look how he turned out.
I don't know. And I could say stuff about the girls too, but things that at the time felt as big as this.
Right.
And
right.
and God was there for that. So just to rest in that, God has given me special mercy for each of these things as they come up. You know, I have a procedure, and I was like, and this isn't deep nor spiritual maybe, but it's like people do this and I'm a people. That's
Right.
what I always that's what I always tell Belinda is like, so just know that nothing's happening to you that hasn't happened to others.
Right.
And one thing that has really helped me that I haven't had a chance to, or it has just come to my mind that I wanted to say is, this is the same. We have access to the same faith that the martyrs had. Mm-hmm. For Stephen and getting hung upside down, and the faith of the martyrs, we have access to that. To you know, Bonhoeffer, to all these guys over the years and ladies that have been martyred. This is the same. This is the same faith. This is the same thing that they have. Certainly, it can sustain you in what you're going through.
Right. Well, we have the Holy Spirit. Well, I love how you broke that down between believers and non-believers, but there's also the third of people who maybe you think you are. And I think that's such a, I hate to use the word epidemic, but I really do think it is, especially in our day and age. You can kind of be whoever you want to be at any given time. And I think that reality really sets in quick when you are faced with a hardship. Maybe you thought that you were a believer, but you're coming to realize quickly that you weren't, because you were falling apart or whatever the case may be. And so I think the big takeaway from what you were, well, in addition to what you were saying, is just be honest. Be honest where you are with the Lord. Be honest with yourself, and you can. And like Matt, you had times where you did need to just sulk for a minute and not so, but
and
not,
I reserve the right to do it in the future.
Of course. Yes, of course. But we're not saying put on some happy face and you just can't be grumpy all the time. Like, there are going to be moments where you are sad, and there are going to be moments where you are going to mourn life being different, and you're going to mourn the brokenness of this world that has touched you in this way. And so be honest about that. Be real about that. God is big enough to handle that. God is big enough to take that. You don't have to tiptoe your way around God. I have thrown fits at him in the past. I'm raising my hand right now. Like, I have done that when things have felt catastrophic. But he's not only big enough to handle that, he wants that. He's our Father, and you want your child to talk to you, and you want your child to come to you even when they don't understand what's going on, and even, like, there you have that relationship with him. And so that's just one thing that, and what part of what you're saying too is just be honest. If you're not a believer, like, it's time to really like deal with these things. If you are, continue to be honest with the Lord and move through that. I love Psalm 23 because he doesn't say, even though I approach the valley, even though I fly over the valley, even though I sit in the valley. He says, no, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So keep going. Yes, you can cry along the way. Yes, you can be angry. Yes, you can be sad. Yes, you can be happy and rejoicing in those moments where he has provided for you. But continue to walk. You have no idea. He's given you today. He's given you this step. Continue to take that step forward. Okay, one last question.
Yep.
In this...
Who's your favorite?
What?
I thought it was going to be who's your favorite child, but we can save that one for
Well,
Y'all all
know
know
the
who it
answer
is.
to that. It's become me. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. In this and everything else in life, what do you want to be known for?
Yeah.
And how do you pray that Christ is displayed in and through you most?
You know, that should be an easier question than it is.
It's a big, that's a big question.
It is.
So fun story. When Sean and I went on our first date, neither one of us really wanted to be or were ready to be in a relationship at that given time. And so I am my father's child, and it was literally an interrogation. And the very first question I asked him was, what do you want written on your tombstone?
Oh, gosh.
So yeah, first question first date. And I just wanted to so, I mean, this is where I'm just turning the tables to you, but in a more eloquent way. But it is something, it is a heavy question.
Yeah. I think in this, and that part of this one that makes it tough is in this and everything else
in life. Yeah.
So they have to be congruent. They have to be the same
You
thing.
can break it up.
No,
you can
I
give
don't
two
need
answers.
to. I don't need to, because it might have been before when there wouldn't have been in this part.
Right.
But just don't act like an orphan. I'm not an orphan. I'm not swaying in the wind. I'm not wobbling. I am not an orphan. So don't act like one. I'm a child of God, and I'm not to be blown around by whatever comes our way. So if I could be known for doing this well, and it might not just be this, it's the next this.
Right.
If
Whatever
this isn't
this
it,
is,
then Sean, you might be visiting me in some other situation somewhere down the road, or Ellen or Mary, but wherever I'm at is just, don't act like an orphan. You're not an orphan.
I love that. I think the Lord gave me a little passage to read that I think sums up our time together, and maybe it would just be a blessing to you to be read over, Matt. And this is 2 Timothy 2, 1 through 13. Don't worry, I'm a fast reader, but it's so good. And I just want you to really soak this in. Everyone who's listening says, "You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. These things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Suffer hardship with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life, so that he may please the one who has enlisted him as a soldier. Also, if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not win the prize unless he competes according to the rules. The hard-working farmer ought to be the first to receive his share of the crops. Consider what I say, for the Lord will give you understanding in everything. Remember Christ Jesus, risen from the dead, descendant of David, according to my gospel, for which I suffer hardship, even to imprisonment as a criminal. But the word of God is not imprisoned. For this reason I endure all things for the sake of those who are chosen, so that they also may obtain the salvation which is in Christ Jesus, and with it eternal glory. It is a trustworthy statement, for if we died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself."
Can I change my answer?
Sure.
That's what I want it to be known for.
It's the same thing.
Totally the same thing.
I want to be a good soldier, a good runner, and a hardworking farmer, just like they described there.
But we're a part of his kingdom, and you're right. And that's where it went with that. You're not an orphan. I mean, it's the same. It's, obviously he says it a little differently, but we're not. We are in him. We belong to him because he has risen from the dead, and we are alive and have risen with him too. And this, again, is not our home. And so, well, any parting words, babe? You have anything else to say?
No. Thanks for having me. I want my own microphone next time.
Yeah, I'll teach you to procrastinate. I'm just kidding. Not really. Do you hear all the squeaking that's going on? Sorry, guys. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for being here and for having this conversation, and Babe for chiming in and imparting your wisdom as well. And thank you so much for listening, friends. We prayed beforehand, and I have no doubt that God is going to use this conversation to touch many lives in different ways. And part of the beauty of this is only He knows how He's going to use this. So my encouragement to you is that you would listen, and that you would respond, and that you would obey whatever prompting that He is nudging you with His Spirit. And if you don't know Him, know Him. Please come to faith in Him and accept Christ and what He's done on your behalf. And if you do know Him, you don't know Him well enough. None of us do. And so continue to walk through that valley, if it's a valley, or continue to just reach out to Him on the mountaintop of faith that you're on. But regardless, this world that we live in is broken, and our lives are sometimes just really, really hard. But God is good. And as this passage said, his word is not imprisoned. It is open and it is free in our lives always. He sits on the throne and will always be on the throne. He reigns over the universe just as he reigns in every detail of our lives. And I hope and pray this conversation has reminded you that even in the dark valleys, the darkest valleys that we wouldn't wish on anyone else, God is sovereign and he really is working everything out for his glory and our ultimate good. This world isn't our home, and hard circumstances, if nothing else, remind us that we have such a greater future waiting for us with our Savior one day. I am praying now and will continue to pray that you bask in that knowledge and rest in the comfort that that brings. And as always, that God will continue to illuminate your mind and ignite your faith with his word as we all journey closer to him every day.